right now because I think Rosa stepped out. Emily Celeste graduated from the University of Pennsylvania in 2010, and she spent a year after that working with the needy, impoverished youth in Chaparral, New Mexico. She recently moved back to town, and she'll soon be working as a youth minister at St. Thomas the Apostle Parish in Del Mar, New York, and volunteering at Birthright Crisis Pregnancy Center. She'll talk to us about her range of experiences with Catholicism and youth in her year of gracious serving the needy near the Mexican border.
Hi everyone. How's everyone feeling? Do you guys need to stretch or anything? Good. So I guess I will describe at first a little bit of how I got involved in the youth ministry. I was a student at the University of Pennsylvania and was very involved in the athletics there. And unfortunately I wanted to always do mission service, but was not able to do so because of the time commitment. So one summer I was able to go on a week-long mission trip to Chaparral, which is about 30 minutes away from El Paso and the border in Mexico. So I went there for a week and just absolutely fell in love with the community and the simplicity of life that they lived. And so I applied to volunteer for a year after I graduated college. Now between that period of having accepted the, contract to volunteer and actually go, I found the Frassati group and came, though I had always had a certain, love and affection for the Lord and growing in His, growing in the love for the Eucharist. It wasn't until I actually joined the Frassati group where I truly started to understand and want to live the teachings of the church and really read the catechism and be enveloped in all of the beautiful facets of the faith. So you take this young woman who's growing in fervor for the truth of the faith, and I went down to New Mexico. So sometimes it's a little bit it's a little bit difficult to talk about the people that I've loved there and who have loved me in return. And people aren't a zoo. Sometimes I feel like you can talk about people as though they're an experience, but all these people I talk about are a life. And as St. Teresa of Avila once said, if I say anything heretical, please forgive me. It is out of ignorance and not malice. But I will try to stay on that. So I cannot begin to even tell you how beautiful the people in the community are. While at the same time I struggled often with how little support and encouragement there were in living the vibrancy of the faith, as a truly loyal to the church environment often bestows. But I will begin with the beautiful. During my first months there, we had developed an intimate relationship with one of the families. It would soon blossom in the following months into spending several hours helping the kids with homework, being force-fed chimichangas, and playing more dominoes and card games than any human being has the capacity to play. One night, I wrote about this family in my journal, so I'd like to share with you a part of my experience in the raw state, I suppose, that it was experienced. You walk in, immediately struck by the unfamiliarity of your surroundings, incipient judgments, and inchoate discomfort fueled by a fear of the unknown, the different. Its odor is ambient. It floods your nostrils, an amalgamation of beer, dense sweat, and cigarette. You force a stoic expression. Do not betray your repulsion, your privileged upbringing, yet it is recognizable. Your hand meets his calloused palm. He mumbles a kindness in Spanish you do not understand. You smile a smile that tells him you do not know. It is sweet. It is unsure. It has made its home in foreign territory. A default gesture. Love abbreviated, encapsulated in upturned lips. His mother waves a hand. Siéntate. You respond accordingly. Her wrinkles are deep, distinguishing a wisdom of years and experience. Her eyes rejoice in greeting yours. They offer her before you can refuse. And you marvel at such a woman. Her defiant, knowing wrinkles captivate your curiosity, and you secretly hope that you will have the opportunity to draw her someday. She places food on your plate. You smile graciously even after the second helping, which found its way onto your plate by no authority of your own, and will find its way into your stomach with no capacity of your own. You play hand games and have a staring eye contest with the little girl. Your eyes lock. They do not move. Your Polish eyes demand victory until playful ambition is subdued by the depth and tenderness of your opponent's innocence. And you find that your eyes have the capacity to persist. Persist, yes, when they first realize they are gazing into something more than eyes. And right before you become a little bit more each other's in your mutual vulnerability, you blink. You watch the girl play with her older brother, a young man you've heard things about, things that do not match the smile on his sister's face, which his love has just produced. He feeds a young girl, his niece, whose father is absent. Daddy, she says, and for today, his love is her father. Before you leave, you place the smell. It is the same beer-tinted, sweat-drenched, cigarette-embedded smell that told you that Grandpa was in the shed, that he had picked you some raspberries, that he needed your help to close the garden gate. You hug them goodbye, the wet from the old woman's lips freshly implanted on your cheek, and you wonder if you were really so far from home after all. We befriended several families who were equally as beautiful as this one. Chopra was a place of lived humilities and lived generosities and lived self-sacrifice. There's a great devotion to Our Lady of Guadalupe. I think even if people didn't know anything about her or that she is there to lead them to her son, they fled to her. There's much simple faith, and people often did not know the reasons for why they went to church or crossed themselves each time they passed church. But somehow many people, mostly the grandparents and some parents, were embedded in a Catholic culture of certain doings, and among those doings was turning to God in need. And in these simple truths, and in people's simple turnings to God, there was much beauty. And I think much of the faith, unprompted by feeling or privilege with God, which God calls us to live. But Chaparral was also a place of many poverties. There was a poverty of choice with a lot of undocumented people in the community. There are many kids who arrived to the U.S. at young ages. Two of the families we were with and made good friends with. One of the boys arrived when he was 6 months old, and one of them arrived when they were 4 years old. Many of the kids have never been to Mexico, or they grow up thinking they're U.S. citizens. In one case, there was a 12-year-old girl who grew up thinking that she was a U.S. citizen. And when she was 12, her parents broke the news to her. She was devastated. There are also something called checkpoints, which in a 50-mile radius of the port of entry, there's Border Patrol, and when you go past that, they ask, are you a citizen? And if you're not, obviously you're going to be deported. So people are really, if you're not a citizen, you're constricted to a certain area within that 50-mile radius, and it becomes a breeding ground for a lot of things like drugs or gangs. Things like that. A lot of economic poverty, and mostly what I notice, I think, is the poverty and the breakdown of the family. Because of a mixed immigration status of most of the families, parents could be in one place, kids could be in another place. There's one family who we became very close with, and in 2007 there were a series of raids in which Border Patrol came to homes and just asked people if they were citizens or not. Now, this is not something that happens on a regular basis, but this was one very unfortunate moment. So this family had been here in the U.S. for 20 years. The kids were all citizens. However, the mother and the father were not. The mother and the father were unfortunately deported, and the oldest sister left to raise her younger siblings. In this environment, the discipline which parents often give to their children was not available, especially to the two boys who were in the middle, who fell to drugs and some gang activity. And the two youngest, who went through a lot of depression and dependency, issues with dependency and trust. And I'll speak about how I guess we worked with them later. But it's very sad to see that breakdown. So this is a place of many hurts. Another woman's story, a young woman's story who we became close with. She was sexually abused by her father when she was very young. And she is 20 years old at the moment and has a 7-year-old boy and a 3-year-old boy. But it is so difficult knowing her past and watching her go through relationships with men as she does, with so little value in herself. And you see it developing, and having developed in the roots of that upbringing, the things she went through. And sometimes you try to speak to her of her value, of hope, of Christ, of the church, of something divine, but it is lost merely in what is unknown, what is inexperienced of love. When I was down there, I was thinking of a lot of different perceptions and things, and trying to really put my finger on what was missing there. So I kind of came up with an analogy of a chandelier. So it is as though the Catholic Church, in her true form, is a grand and exquisite chandelier for her values and teachings, for the life which she offers. And you wish you could show people this chandelier, for its existence breathes hope, breathes beauty, which is a sign of salvation, of heaven, of promise, of hope in the Eucharist, and that there is value in suffering, in the promise of forgiveness and confession, of healing. But instead, you feel like you are just handing out candlesticks. When there is not a church, an atmosphere which upholds the truths of the faith as Christ gave them to the church, that is, the church's teachings in all her forms, the image of the chandelier fades into a less exquisite, more skewed and dim conduit of light. Though she still hands out truth in parts and candlesticks, she is depriving her members of their greatest light and hope. There were many challenges in the particular church in that community I was in, which did not help to express the true life of our Catholic Church and the true freedom which her beauty and teachings bring. The greatest injury was that the local priest discouraged his parishioners from praying before the Blessed Sacrament, at one time telling me that Jesus was not suffering on the altar, but is suffering in the people, and that I should not pray before the tabernacle. Now we know that though Christ is suffering in his people, this truth does not ever devalue his true presence in the Eucharist. And I just encourage everyone to pray for priests, and this priest especially, but at priests everywhere. The Mass was often a place of socialization, and though many people attended on principle, there seemed little true knowledge of Christ's Eucharistic presence or reverence for his Eucharistic self. I know this is probably commonplace in many parishes, not just in more impoverished areas, but it's more widespread. And because there was a lot of suffering in Chaparral, there was a lot of emphasis on eliminating that suffering, which, as Christ's disciples, is a part of our mission. Yet I often wondered if too frequently this emphasis on eliminating suffering came at the expense of an emphasis on the purity Christ calls us to live. I wondered often, based on my observations, if suffering was seen as the truest evil, rather than sin, which caused that suffering. Often I would see pains, and I understood how it is difficult to look above, how it is difficult to look to heaven when it seems you cannot turn away from earth or your pain, or are not shown a heavenly love so much in your own life. Coming back home, it seems like reverence in a Mass is a luxury, as though loyalties to the Church are a product of being wealthier, having some standard of living which enables you to look at details of the faith, as it's been told to me before. It seems so much in Chaparral that suffering took precedence over loyalties to the rich church in Rome because of suffering's loudness. I think it is a mistake in certain areas of poverty, or anywhere, to think that loyalties to the church are mere details, or details which those suffering cannot attain to. I think to Mother Teresa and her work, but mostly to her faith, to her loyalty to the church. Though in the most simple and impoverished of atmospheres, she upheld the importance of the church's simple truths in Eucharistic adoration. She emphasized the importance of the Rosary. She was adamant about the salvific truth and redemptive suffering. Though a conduit of simple faith, she promoted truth in faith. I looked to her often when I stumbled to bridge this gap between the suffering I saw in Chaparral and the life and liberation and the truths of the Catholic Church, and what can bring true freedom to suffering that we all experience. Christ in the Eucharist and Christ in his people are not divided. Both are a part of any service. So I just have a couple points I guess I wanted to make to encourage you guys and anyone to take with them. Just the importance of having a community, a parish community which truly upholds the true teachings of the faith, loyal to the Church and our Pope Benedict XVI. And I also I encourage you guys to give, all of us, to give reasons for church practices. Often people really misunderstand the faith, and I think sometimes they will not initiate it, but it would be good for us to initiate something like, you know, for example, like wearing a scapular, and you see someone kind of glance inquisitively at it, you know, maybe misunderstanding or not knowing, but, you know, actually saying, do you know why I'm wearing this? You can ask a question to lead into an explanation sometimes. Also, along with what Nate was saying a little bit before about how youth are searching for beauty and truth, and there's just this intuition in us that something is amiss. And unfortunately, we look for it in many counterfeits, but I think that is a great opportunity for us to integrate this youth's search for truth and beauty with the source of truth and beauty. I remember reading a quote by Dostoevsky once in one of his 800-page books. He said, "Beauty will save the world." And I remember reading in Montesquieu's Persian Letters, "Man has authority over the world, but beauty has authority over man." And I think this is something that is really going to draw people to Christ. Also, along with the parish having a truly, the parish that's truly loyal to the church, I think it is important to bring youth into an atmosphere of life and truth, into youth ministries or into a parish that truly recognizes Christ's Eucharistic presence and truly, you know, breathes that life of the church. And I do encourage, if you guys have grandkids or kids or anyone who is thinking of doing a year of volunteer service, I highly and completely recommend it. It's beautiful to see another culture, and I think just the only thing I would say is make sure they go in knowing to base their service off of Christ's Eucharistic presence and spending time with Christ and letting Him love them and just sitting and loving Him. And that's really all I have to say. Thank you.